Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Hopefully you guys had a good holiday and are fixing to have a good new year. And welcome to my month late at this point, Godzilla -1 review. I had kind of like a script for it, but honestly, I've seen it a couple times now and I have it pretty fresh in my head that I'm just gonna spitball this. This is gonna be a semi-non-spoiler review. I will warn you when I go into spoilers towards the end of the video because I have to talk about spoilers to talk about one of my cons, which there are not many of. And if you couldn't tell by my excitement and the fact that there are not many cons, I really liked this movie. This movie is directed by Takashi Yamazaki. He has worked with Godzilla before. He has a movie that features a Godzilla in it that's not a Godzilla movie, I suppose, but I haven't ever seen it, so I don't have too much information about that. But he's also done the visual effects for the Godzilla ride in Japan. So he has experience with Godzilla. This version of Godzilla is actually kind of based off that Godzilla, but upgraded for, like, you know, cinema quality. This movie has heart. It has a pretty heavy story, some moments of levity. It is a good movie with good characters, good score, and everything. Oh, and Godzilla's in it. And I think that's probably the biggest mark for this movie that you're going to hear a lot of people talking about, is the fact that this is just a good movie. And at points you forget it's a Godzilla movie because you're so engaged with these characters on screen and you're so rooting for them and hoping that they're going to be safe, and then you remember Godzilla's gonna show up, and it's just incredible. So just to kind of get that out of the way, this is a fantastic movie. If that's all you needed to hear to go find whatever cinema you can find it at, because I know it's not playing in every theaters, it's pretty limited release, but if you can find it, worth the trip, go see this movie. Highly recommend it. But if you want a little bit more details, then stick around. Let's just start with the score. Easy thing to talk about. It's got a beautiful score. A lot of what you hear in the trailer actually is translated into this movie. I know sometimes trailer music for movies doesn't really ever show up in the movie, but what you hear in the trailer is what you get in this movie, as well as some not remasters, but just kind of re-recordings of Ifukube's music that you hear from the original 1954 movie. You hear obviously the Godzilla theme and a couple other really good classics that never feel out of place. They feel very fitting. And I think, in fact, if I'm not mistaken, I haven't seen much of the Showa era Godzilla films in a long time, like some of the later 60s and 70s ones. But I think they even iterate on some of the Ifukube music, if I'm not mistaken, towards the end of the film, which this isn't a spoiler, but they play some Ifukube music. You can kind of pretty much guess that they're going to do that. And I think they iterate upon it. So they actually expand it further. Could be mistaken on that, but if I'm not, it's really awesome to hear. I think the score fits the tone of this movie so well and really elevates it. It's in the background a lot, so it's never out of place or feels like it's overbearing. It's just exactly what a score should do. It elevates the emotions and the tone of the scene that it's in, and it does a really good job of it. And I mean, so I saw this movie in IMAX, so the sound quality and everything was incredible. If you can see it in IMAX, highly recommend it. But let's move on. So the characters. The characters are fantastic in this. I honestly think the heart and soul of this movie are Noriko and Akiko. They're the woman and child that technically the main character, Shikishima, has a run-in with, and they, after the war, everything's destroyed in Japan, and they're trying to rebuild their lives, and they kind of just hang out together and grow a little bit in that area. And I think that so much of the emotional impact of this movie comes from Noriko and Akiko. I would say they're the characters that most take you from this being a Godzilla movie to this being just a good movie, just plain good cinema. And I'm going to say that a lot too. This is a good movie and Godzilla's here too. And that elevates it. And anyway, so the main character, Shikishima, he is an ex-kamikaze pilot, or a failed kamikaze pilot, if you will. It's kind of about him returning to Japan. People disrespect him because they think he's one of the reasons that they lost. But so it's got some heavy themes, and it follows that journey and his PTSD and his survivor's guilt. But it's got some really hopeful themes as well. And we'll kind of come back to how hopeful of a movie this actually is, even at times when it feels so dreary and so intense and just like, holy crap, people went through this. Not the Godzilla part, but, you know, the Japan after the war part. And there's some other great characters as well. I'm blanking on some of the names. I know Noda is the kind of nerdy guy on the boat. So Shikishima eventually gets a job, which is pretty cool. They go out in a wooden boat and that you see in the trailer. Actually, there's one right here. And you're kind of following their journey as they are trying to clean up the mines from the sea that both sides left during World War II, because this movie takes place a couple years after World War II. And that's kind of his gig, and the story just kind of takes off from there. Shikishima has a personal connection to Godzilla. I won't spoil why, but I think it's really well done, and I think it's just full setup and payoff, this movie. Everything that's set up is paid off beautifully. And the boat captain's amazing, and the kid, oh man, I'm forgetting his name. I'm forgetting both their names, but they are both wonderful characters. I think they do a really good job reminding you that even in times of turmoil and trauma and just suffering for a country, people like this exist, and they have high spirits, and they are hopeful, and they kind of bring people together, and they just do a wonderful job of that. And the captain, whose name I'm forgetting, he's funny because he like doesn't trust the Japanese government, but he loves his fellow man and his countrymen and everything, and he's just a great dude. And it's just really fun to watch all their dynamics on screen because they all have such good chemistry together. And I think that really ties into when one or more or all of them become in danger at some point in the movie, you are really afraid. And that just kind of ties me into Godzilla. This version of Godzilla, and don't get me wrong, I like variety with my Godzilla. I like fun, campy Godzilla. I like Godzilla that jumps up and down and does his little roar, that slides on his tail and drop kicks people. I like the American version of Godzilla where he's kind of like this physical embodiment of like the god of nature or something, and he kind of just like, he is a force of nature that makes sure nature stays in check, and he's kind of benevolent overall, really. He doesn't go out of his way to hurt people. He just says, oh, a parasite's sprouting up over there. That's going to disrupt the balance. I'm going to go get him. And people like worshipped him and stuff. I like that version of Godzilla. This is absolutely not that version of Godzilla, if you couldn't tell from the trailers. This is the bad guy Godzilla. This is, I would say, worse than the 1954 version. Not that he's much different from the 54 version, just this time around, instead of Emiko's father wanting to study Godzilla and like is really upset by the fact that him killing him, everybody in Japan is like, get that mother, because he's just like, he is the bad guy in this, and he is horrifying. And every time he shows up on screen, you're kind of cheering for the fact that it's like such a cool version of Godzilla, but you are also, because the story is written so well and the characters are written so well, you're also terrified for the characters because they are right under his foot a couple times, and you know, he gets real close to hurting a lot of our characters, and I won't really say much more than that because that would be spoilers. So this Godzilla is nasty. He's just like, man, there's like, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to spoil it, because everything they do with Godzilla is cool, but just the general gist of it, this encounter right here, that's one of the most tense scenes I've seen in a movie in a long time. They kind of do that thing they did in The Dark Knight whenever the Joker's on screen, where you hear like just this like pitch rising, and that scene is worth the IMAX ticket alone. But he's just like this beast that is ravenous and vengeful and hurt. He is a tragic figure in and of himself, and he wants everyone near him to know that. And it's one of those things where he's just like, oh, cool, you guys kind of built up a little bit after the war. That's nice. Like just crazy. Like he is a menace. And that's honestly, besides just the fact that this is probably one of my favorite Godzilla designs, like physically, just how his skin looks. He looks gnarly. He looks like he's in pain. Just the design looks so true to like Japanese Godzilla. Obviously it is Japanese Godzilla, and you can just see the difference between how we do Godzilla and how they do Godzilla. And man, it's so cool. Also, I won't say anything, but his atomic breath. Cool. Moving on. I thought there was something else I wanted to talk about, but I honestly can't remember it. Oh, you know what? I guess I didn't give this movie a rating. I'm trying to figure out a rating system, but I don't want to just do like, oh, a 7 out of 10 or whatever, or an 8 out of 10. I will just say this. It's minor flaws that I have with it do almost nothing to detract how beautiful of a movie this is. My rating for this movie is just go see it. So this is going to be the spoiler section of the video. I'm going to talk about the very, very ending of the movie and some major plot points and some major revelations in the movie. So if you don't want to see that, get the fudge out of here, go see the movie, come back and watch this part. But before I do that, I will just state this spoiler section. The only reason I'm doing the spoiler section is because while this movie is near perfect, it's not perfect, at least in my opinion. And there are a few cons. One is kind of trivial. I'll just get my first con out of the way. There is a lot of Godzilla screen time in this. He's used very effectively. When he's not on screen is sometimes even scarier than when he is. And I think he's used perfectly. That being said, it's so well done that I could have used maybe 2 to 3 more minutes of him just rampaging shit. Like there's a scene where he makes landfall very briefly at the end of the movie. And then Shikishima tricks him to kind of go back out to sea so they can ultimately do what their plan is, which I'm probably not going to go too much into detail on. But I could have maybe used 2 to 3 more minutes of him just stepping on stuff. That's just me. That's not really a con so much as just like I ate so good. So it's not really a big complaint. It's not really a big con at all, but I did kind of get that feeling. Another con, and this is probably my big one, is just the ending. The ending I think is good. I think it has a good ending. I think it has a hopeful ending. And there's a couple little like, ooh, what could be going on here? The ooh, what could be going on here thing is probably my only other con in this movie. And what I mean by that is during the atomic breath scene, Godzilla makes landfall, he destroys Ginza, and then he does his atomic breath. Within that atomic blast, Noriko and Shikishima are just like standing in awe looking at it because they can't even move. And that's horrifying too. Not like you get people running away, but when they realize what Godzilla just did and they just stand there and drop their arms like, okay, that's almost even scarier. But basically, long story short, Noriko does not survive the blast. She gets blown away. She doesn't survive the blast. The movie is very dark and sad, but it has so many good elements of hope, and it legitimately has a happy ending, both actually and kind of also in my head canon, the way I'm going to kind of look at this thing I don't really like. But it earns its happy ending. Shikishima, a failed kamikaze pilot, thinks, you know what? I have so much survivor's guilt. I'm the reason some of these people on Oto Island died. I'm just going to fly a kamikaze plane into Godzilla. I got a hair stuck on me. Into Godzilla's mouth because I know he's vulnerable from the inside out. I'm going to fly it right into his brain, blow him up, which he does. One of the major themes of this movie is life is not cheap. And it's about Japan rallying together to value life. At the end of World War II, when life was cheap to them and they were getting kamikaze pilots to, you know, fly into battleships and stuff like that. And this movie is talking about how, no, preserve life. Do what you can to preserve life for the generations moving forward. Even if you think you have to sacrifice your life for it, you might not always have to. And your life is valuable too, you know, and it's very hopeful and very beautiful theme of the movie. And anyways, this pilot or this mechanic that Shikishima thought hated him ends up forgiving him and giving him an ejector seat for his plan. So Shikishima's going to fly his thing into Godzilla, but he gives him an ejector seat, you know, and he does. He lives, goes back. And when he gets back, he even finds out that Noriko is alive. She survived the blast somehow. Very beautiful scene. And, you know, I think that it should have just ended right before they showed this one little thing. So what happens is Shikishima and Akiko bust in the hospital room. They find Noriko. She's all bandaged up. They all cry. They hug. It's very beautiful. And they hug. And then the camera kind of pans over and you see something kind of creeping up Noriko's neck. In Shin Godzilla, they wanted to do a thing where, what was it? They wanted to do this thing where Godzilla's tail sprouted like human-sized Godzilla. So I wouldn't put it past Toho to be like, that's what they're insinuating, that, you know, Noriko and Shikishima and Akiko don't get a happy ending because next week, you know, blah, 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 she turns into a little mini Godzilla and eats everybody. I hope that is not the case. I hope that's just symbol, and this is what it is in my headcanon. This is what I'm leaving it until they almost inevitably make a Godzilla -1, 2. I'm hoping that that's just a little symbolism for war is bad, and you can move on and have a happy life after war and trauma and tragedy, but those scars will always be there. And it's kind of like what I think in my head to kind of avoid the thought of like, oh, are they setting that up? Because I want that. Like they earned that happy ending so much. I just need that little family to have a happy ending and never have to deal with this crap again. So hopefully the symbolism is just that's their way of visually showing that, you know, the scars of war are going to be there because war is bad and it follows you, but you can still have a happy life. You can still move on. There is still beauty in the world. And the reason I think it was a little overdone is if that was the only thing they did, I would have been less worried about it. But then straight up like GMK, they cut to the bottom of the ocean. You see a clump of Godzilla's flesh. You hear the roar. You know this bastard's coming back. And I want him to come back. Like, I think the movie should have ended there. I think they shouldn't have shown what was on Noriko's neck and just had that be happy and beautiful, and then showed Godzilla coming back. But they kind of did both, and I think the movie earned a happy ending so much that I don't want there to be any more unhappiness for these people in this movie. But those are really my only complaints. I'm happy that Godzilla might come back, especially this version of Godzilla that might come back. I loved... They'll probably make him bigger if he comes back, but I loved his size in this. He's like vulnerable to battleships and stuff, but Japan just had no resources. I love this movie. I've seen it a couple times. I'm going to try to see it again because I know they're releasing a black and white version of it, but I want to hear from you guys. What did you think of this movie? Is there anything in it that I missed thematically that I didn't talk about? Because there are many more viewings I'm going to have of this movie, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. So let me know in the comment section down below. And if you haven't seen this movie, but for some reason stuck around to the spoiler section, sorry I ruined it for you, but please go see it. I'm sure it'll still be just as impactful. That's really all I have to say. Go see Godzilla -1. I hope they do a Godzilla -2, I guess they might call it. And yeah, for a movie made on $15 million, to be making as much as it is. I think the last time I heard, I think they're over $50 million worldwide. That's huge. So yeah, hopefully they do more. I will sit here, right here, and not move until they do. Bye.